I am Jason Smith. I'm an enterprise solutions architect with MediaCurrent. MediaCurrent is a local Drupal shop. They were the people who put together the first Drupal camp and run it for the last 5 years. We are not organizing this one. The Atlanta Drupal Users Group is organizing it. They've done a fine job. MediaCurrent reaches out and does a lot of things for the community. They're a great company to work for. They're always hiring. They're always looking for great talent. We'd love to hear from you guys. They also pay for the meals that my kids eat, so you guys hat tip. So who is the Weather Channel? Why was Drupal a good choice? Review of what we've done, where we're going, and so forth. I go into a lot more detail on the business side of what Weather Channel does in the DrupalCon presentation. Feel free to look that one up. What we'll focus on today is the technical side of things. In terms of Drupal site and migrating the world's largest, they get 50 million page views a day on average. They have 144 origin servers across 3 data centers, 30 million unique visitors per second. The reason I just draw out these statistics is they're fairly staggering. They do forecasts for 3 million locations. For Superstorm Sandy, which was their busiest week ever, they had over 300 million page views, which is a huge number. When you're talking about mitigating that kind of traffic, it's not just the sheer volume of traffic they have, it's the fact that spikes can come in overnight. Here we talk about going from 100 million requests to 300 million requests in a single day. So it's not as if you can provision for that kind of spike overnight. So that kind of thing kind of throws you for a bit. So let's talk about engaging with the Weather Channel. The first thing we did, we worked with them. They had developed a scorecard where they evaluated a number of CMS platforms on the basis of these metrics. You guys can read them later, but the point is, I wouldn't be here if Drupal didn't score very well on all of these. After we were in the final round, we did a little mini discovery with the Weather Channel team, did a series of proofs of concept to prove that we could solve the types of problems that needed to be solved. And I want to say that I don't want to understate the importance of this. This was a really important part of the process because it allowed us not only to get to know the capabilities of the team at the Weather Channel, allowed them to get to know the capabilities of our team. It also allowed us to get a hint of what scope was and whether or not we wanted to get involved. We didn't, but we went for it anyway. We did a deep dive discovery on all of the pieces of the project. We said, what are all the moving parts? What are the pieces that need to happen? What's our timeline? We tried to put together some idea of what to expect. So here are the bigger challenges that we were asked to address. There were a lot more than what's listed here, but these are the bigger pieces, and these are the ones we'll talk about. First up, integration of legacy platforms. So they, prior to us coming on site, they had a number of legacy platforms, some of them built by employees that have long left, some of them are commercial platforms that don't have the support they'd like or that don't move in the speed that they want them to move. So what we were able to do is we were to take pieces like image management, article management, slideshow management, things that Drupal does very well, and we were able to take pieces off the shelf that Drupal provides, file entity, custom content types, node reference services, etc. And we were able to deliver a lot of that functionality virtually overnight. The pieces we weren't able to deliver, we developed a web services layer to abstract away. So that way, when those systems are able to be replaced, it's a simple matter of matching the API. So specifically, we did not take over video management. So Drupal has a long history of being powerful in the realm of integrating with third-party systems. This is a slide you may see a lot. And the point I'm trying to make here is, for example, when the Twitter API came out, Drupal had a module to integrate with it within 24 hours. This is just how fast Drupal moves, how easily it is to integrate with third-party systems. We had to do a number of custom integrations for this platform, for this project, and we were able to rip them out quickly because the API was there. Ooh, wrong direction. Content entry challenges. So their existing platform was Java-based. It ran in a desktop application. I think it's Java-based. So they could only have a single article open at a time. When you wanted to copy an image, you had to go open a separate system, close the first system, fill out the image metadata, copy the image ID, put it into Notepad, go back to the desktop app for modifying the article, paste the asset ID, launch a little web widget thing, close it, save, publish, distribute. We were able to bring the famous 13 clicks to publish down to 4. And why is content entry such a challenge for Weather Channel in particular? Part of the reason is that they aren't targeting just one device. They actually, I think, target 7, 4 of which we're showing here. We have the big web desktop, we have a large mobile device, normal mobile device, and say a data feed, which is consumed by third parties. They want to be able to write a single article and have it consumed on all three. Now, that isn't as simple as just having the text there, because, for example, on the big web, you have a video. Here you have a large image, here a smaller image, and here an asset reference. You want to be able to have that information adapted and suited to the target it's going to. Buttons were in the office order what you expect. The other thing is, we wanted to make this as intuitive as possible. So, for example, we have an abstraction here. Instead of showing the actual video, we have a video node in the article body, and you have a series of buttons along the top that allow you to add them. So you have images, videos, rich media, JavaScript applications, and so forth. And what happens, you click one, you get a little pop-up, you put in all the information about it, it's saved, all the metadata is saved with it. This is what we call the Wix nodes platform. Wait. Wix nodes? Didn't match up. I tried. Wix nodes! It would have been better if I'd have gotten it on the first try. So Wix nodes, you'll see the prefix WX a lot. The reason for it is it's short for weather. So that's something that you'll see coming up over and over. So the Wix nodes are the actual little icon tags that are in the content bodies. And so those are actually full-fledged nodes. So you can reuse them across articles. You can export them in feeds. You can do a number of things with them. So how are they implemented? So as I said before, we've got that button bar in the WYSIWYG editor. We use regular WYSIWYG hooks. Each one of them corresponds with an entity in Drupal. This is a content type. So there's the forecast one. Here's for in partnership, an internal image, video, YouTube, etc. And on each content type, we have any fields that are relevant to it. So for example, in the forecast, we have a location field and say a description about that location. And so that way, whenever we want to reuse that content, we know exactly what it's referring to. So moving on, here's the actual data that configures how it appears in the button bar. This is the image that appears in the button bar, the little image that appears in the content body. And the way is so how far to the left or right. So this is all configurable, it's all abstracted, it's easy to add and remove new ones. The Wix node platform, as I said, uses the WYSIWYG editor, WYSIWYG module and the CTools module. We just implement hook WYSIWYG plugin callback to add our widgets to it, and then it's custom entities that provide the UIs. So all of it's straight Drupal core stuff. We were able to just drop it right in. So now we have the weather node entities, the nodes, as I said. Each one of those forecasts, those YouTube videos, etc., those are nodes. And we have tokens in the body text saying this node goes here, but we don't want to render the video directly into the article body, because if we did that, we'd only be able to show it to one target. We'd only be able to display it to big web, say. It wouldn't be able to deliver it to video. So what we do, if you guys are familiar with input filters, we wrote a custom input filter. The input filter parses that data as soon as it's rendered to whatever the particular target is. So that way it's only rendered at the last possible second. And so here's another abstraction. This is another common theme you'll see with anything we do with the Weather Channel is the huge number of abstractions. Much like the weather itself with any large enterprise, if you don't like the requirements, just wait 5 minutes. So what we did is we made everything so that you could change out the pieces of it. So here in this case, what we're doing is saying every time you see a forecast weather node, use this system to display it, and we can change that on a per module basis. So what is that? That is the presentation framework. This is another system we built for the Weather Channel. This is a way of getting those actual tokens and turning them into content on the various targets. Here's how we did it. We used AngularJS. Though you could use anything else, it's just a framework for delivering JavaScript, CSS, and template files. The various parts of the page, in terms of layout, are Angular modules or presentation framework modules. They are simply folders that contain a template that is loaded into that section of the page, an info file that describes any of the JavaScript that's going to be loaded every time this thing is on the page, and any information about what needs to happen when it's initialized. The info files are in JSON, and we wrap Form API for settings pages. So you just write Form API in JSON, it's interpreted in real time and shown to the user that way. So what that means is that we have a way for people who don't know Drupal, except for the Form API reference, to write custom modules for displaying content in Drupal and displaying it. So you can use multiple presentations. We can have Angular render the stuff. It can be a static template that's just bloated directly up to the page. You can use PHP template, which you're already familiar with, the TippleFips, or ESI. Oops, wrong way again. And all of this is supported through panels. Each of these modules is exposed through panels interface as custom content types. If you guys are ever in panels and you say add a content and there's a big list of stuff, this is what will appear there. So end to end, what we've got is we've got a system whereby you have a custom body field with the custom buttons. You click the button, you get a pop-up to enter information about a YouTube video, for example. When you drop it in the body, it's a token that is rendered on demand in each of the target environments. So the next issue we were tackling, page building. So the scenario that was going on here is the same desktop app in Java. It could only work on one page at a time. Templates were a little awkward because they were actually in source. You actually had to modify the template in source at all times. You guys have ever used, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. They had too many page templates to go through. They weren't very well organized. They needed URL parity across all pages. That is to say, the mobile version of this page should have the same URL as the web version of this page. And there wasn't an easy way to figure out which template belonged to which URL. So what we did is we brought panels into the scenario. Panels allows you to change layouts on demand, allows you to add and remove content, and with the addition of variants allows us to do the URL parity across the devices. That is to say, mobile and big web versions of the page go to the same place. You just manage it all from one place instead of 6. Yep?
How does it affect the cacheability of the page?
So that's a good question. So for example, with the big web versus mobile, the URL will contain im or www. So that is part of the cache key for the page. So when you're requesting the www version, it is built from scratch, its origin, but then it's cached forever as a www piece of content. Whereas the m dot is a completely different piece of content from the caching system's perspective.
Is that with Drupal level cache or?
No, Varnish and Akamai, yeah. So the cache key recognizes the domain as a different object.
What did you do to Drupal cache? Just turn it off?
No, we can still do page cache. So, or sorry, panel cache and pane cache and Angular cache. And our system has its own caches. So, yeah. So we were able to deliver the number of templates out of the gate. This is an example of what we provided to them. These are responsive templates that work in panels. And we handed off to the team two themes using these templates and exposing layouts to panels. Within, say, a month, they were able to roll out 2 more themes, so they've got the control over it. They were able to modify the layouts per need. So this, relatively straightforward. It was good, something good in their hands. To those unfamiliar, this is what the panels interface actually looks like. You've got, say, for example, a header here, a linker here. And a linker, for example, is a presentation module. We talked about the presentation framework. This is a module that appears. And you'll notice that, for example, this one's 100% width and this one's 50% width. This is a little bit of a weakness of the panel system, that it's not easy to do that type of sub-layout within Drupal. Those of you who have already attended Derek Rapp's session about classy panel styles, we developed that system to address this particular problem. What that allows you to do is on a per pane basis, click the little pane, say that you'd rather have it be 50% width, and I was hoping that was going to animate. Yeah, and so for example, this is set 100% width, these are set 33%. So now within the UI you can see your layout choices being made in real time. So this gave the end user full control over the layout of the content as it appeared on the page, gave them full control over the content that appeared there. They had the ability to change templates, and you had the ability to deliver multiple templates or multiple variants of a page on the basis of a request. So let's talk about what variants are for those of you guys who are not familiar with panels. The way variants work is that you'll actually do, say, 6 different layouts to address a particular page's requirements. Let's say we're talking about the forecast page. This is a page you go to see what the weather in my city is. One of the first things we do is we need to find out if that page actually exists. And if it doesn't, we would deliver a 404 version of that page. All of these versions of the page exist within one panel, in one place, and they're easy to choose from. There's user interface tools that allow you to set up selection rules, such as location ID does not exist. So we don't show the 404. Versus location does exist, we don't show the 404. Then we find out if we're at the m.domain or the www.domain. If we're at the www, we don't need the mobile version. And then we find out whether or not that location is in severe weather mode or not. And depending upon that, we choose the last variant, and that's the one that's actually delivered over the wire. So the rules are straightforward, it's well understood. The user has a good, clear way to get the pages to behave the way they want. So now let's talk about caching challenges. So the existing platform has about 60% cache efficiency, so the 40% of the requests are going straight to origin. That means low cache efficiency, more traffic to origin means more servers means more headaches, and more money. I should have thrown that in there. So for example, if in a traditional model, when you've got users all over the world, you might just increase the number of origin boxes you have behind a load balancer, call it a day. Traffic grows again, you might introduce Akamai to the solution. But the problem with Weather Channel in particular is that you might be visiting from two locations where they're practically neighbors and get two very different pieces, two different pages. For example, Austin gets this weather forecast and Houston gets this weather forecast. Those of you paying attention might say, well, those are two separate pages. Why don't you just render them separately? Well, the reason is, if you'll recall, we have 3 million locations. That's an awful lot of pages to go to origin. And forecast data doesn't live very long, maybe 5 minutes at most, which means we're serving 3 million pages times 5 every 5 minutes for the local suite. And that kind of planning ahead. See, I told you it was worth it. So how do we approach this problem? First thing we do, we break up the page elements. We identify the parts that are high reuse or low reuse, and we move to a service-oriented architecture. We use services to build the page. You guys hear a lot about headless Drupal. That's a big thing that's being talked about right now. This is kind of a compromise approach and that fit best to their particular use case. So here, let's talk about it a little bit. Everybody following along? All right, let me talk about what Akamai and ESI actually do. Let's say that you are a veterinary clinic, and one of the things that you provide for the people who visit is that you will make a lost dog poster. What that means is that you will take the photo that they give you, go all the way to the Kinko's, scan it, print it, bring it back from the Kinko's to your office and give it back. Now that trip to Kinko's and back, that takes you an hour every time you do it, and that's a lot of travel when you've got other things to do. So what Akamai does for you is it allows you to, say, pre-print 1,000 of these pages, and only the parts that vary are injected in your office. So you would take the photo that was given to you, and you would just kind of paste it right over top of the missing section. So, it's not WordPress? Nobody? No. Yeah. CMS Architect? Simplefit? Yeah, I don't just the groans at this point. I don't need you guys. All right, so in this scenario, Drupal's playing the role of the FedEx Kinko's. You don't want to have Drupal do more work than it has to. You don't want to have to go to Drupal more often than you have to. So what we're doing is we go to Drupal once, we get the poster template printed 1,000 times in a literal cache sitting in the corner of our room, and the veterinary clinic is like the browser and Angular where it assembles the pieces and sends them out over the wire. Does that make sense? So that's how we're able to take this page, which has all of this content that varies, and deliver it to different users, and be able to leverage caches effectively as we possibly can, because Drupal only has to deliver part of the page. So let's talk about how we do that. We take the things that we know don't vary very much, like the page layout itself. The page layout's consistent. It always looks the same. It's just the content in the modules that varies. So that stuff, let's let Drupal deliver it once, and then let the caching layer handle it. Then there are things that are moderately dynamic, related content, featured content. This is stuff that we probably want to use Angular or ESI to rewrite on the base page or change after it's been delivered to the browser. And then there are things that change quite a bit, things like forecast data, location data. These are the things that we would want to leverage something that was more highly scalable, just like a key value store, a caching layer. And then we rewrite the page in Angular. So the page is delivered with the space for the forecast data, and then we rewrite it when it's requested. So we use Angular in the data caching layer. So here again, we take this page, separate it into parts that are dynamic, create presentation framework modules for them, and then we assign them responsibilities. For example, location title, static presentation framework module. Local menu module, because we want menu changes to be changed across the entire site. That makes sense for an ESI. Forecast, because that changes so rapidly, that makes sense to be a dynamic JavaScript or an Angular object. Add module, that's dynamic outside of our system. We just let Google fill it in. So here's the kind of the architectural diagram, the more traditional diagram that doesn't involve dogs. We've got the template that Drupal produces with the places where things actually go. We've got this caching data store. Akamai and Varnish are assembling and caching the pages in the middle, and then we deliver a page with no pieces in it, and Angular fills them in. So I'll talk a little bit about the client. Go ahead.
Angular is talking to what? Drupal or something else?
It talks to both. In some cases, it's pulling data from a cached data store from Drupal, but in most cases, it's actually pulling from that caching layer, that data services layer we talked about. So what Drupal does is that, for example, for image data, it is the management system for the actual images, but after it's done processing them, when you save an image, it pushes it out to the data services layer as a full document. So the entire, and it invalidates and replaces the document when the image is updated on Drupal. So that means the data services layer, the caching data store, has all of the data Drupal has. And because it's basically key value, it's much more scalable than Drupal would be. So Angular leverages that.
So that data services layer is PHP or?
Well, in this particular case, it's MongoDB wrapped in Java. I think it's Java. Scala. So yeah, we didn't write the caching layer. So yeah, any more questions about it?
So how does you have it like hooked in to deliver the content?
Yeah, so the caching layer is just think of it as an API that's exposed in the cloud, and so Angular just hits that API and says, give me the last 10 articles, give me the image that this asset ID represents, give me this video collection by ID. And the reason you do that instead of just passing the entire information in the base page is, should we change something about the image or change the image outright, we want to have those changes affected as quickly as possible. If we were to wait for the base page to be invalidated in the caching system, we might wait as long as 30 minutes. But if we allow the caching layer to handle it, because it's just data, it can be invalidated in as short as a minute. Does that make sense? Clear as mud?
I'm trying to picture how Drupal is pushing that out.
So Drupal, yes, effectively. I mean, what we're doing is we're creating a JSON representation of every object that Drupal manages, and then we push that to Mongo as a document. Yeah. And so we're using a UUID module, for those of you familiar. So every element on the site is tagged with a UUID. And we have a hook save. As soon as something's saved, we push it up to the document store. So yeah, that Drupal is very good at presenting user interfaces, at being able to rapidly change data models, at being able to present layouts and structures and give you fantastic UIs. What it's not necessarily as good at is surviving the kinds of surges in traffic that we would see with this site directly. If you were to have Drupal be hit directly by this kind of traffic, you could roast marshmallows from a mile away. So we heavily leverage Akamai, we heavily leverage ESI for this system. So again, what Drupal actually delivers in the case of the title, because this is fairly static content, it will in fact just spit out a title in the base page. The local menu, because menu is used on 53 pages throughout the site, and we want to be able to change the menu for all 53 at once, this is an ESI. That means it's only injected into the page at the Akamai level. So Drupal only has to deliver this page once, and you can have two different user experiences on the basis of it. The forecast, because this is so dynamic, and because the TTL is so low, it makes sense to have this done by Angular. And that's, in fact, what we do. We deliver the template, which is to say the DOM part of the forecast module, and then Angular does a request to the data caching layer and says, what is the forecast data for this location? And because it's a key value research, it's zippy, cacheable, fast.
Is Angular like serving the browser compatibility needs of weather.com? Meaning that, probably doesn't work for some strange scenarios.
Well, you mean like IE6?
Yeah. Or JavaScript turned off.
Yeah, no, if JavaScript is turned off, you will definitely have a degraded experience. Yeah, no, a decision was made when the commitment was made to a client-side rendering model that if you've turned off JavaScript, then the weather will never change. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the thing is you're kind of...
There's no fallback, I said. There's no fallback. It just said,
no. Please
turn on the JavaScript in order to...
Well, so the answer is a little bit more complicated, and it involves Phantom for some very unique situations. I think getting into that, though, let's talk. Yeah, the key thing I was trying to get across is how we were able to slice up the page into pieces that were delivered in different ways according to the needs of that particular page. There was another point. Oh, the other point is, Weather Channel is I don't know if to call it atypical. A lot of sites, the surge in traffic, that's when it's most important for it to actually work. So for Weather Channel in particular, when it rains, they score. So, we can't all be winners. So so we had to have a model that, if we hit a surge, there was a way to adapt to that sudden demand without having to resort to adding more origin boxes. If you had to add more origin boxes, you're talking about several days potentially. I mean, hours in the cloud, but there's no guarantees you can spin up that quickly. Whereas with this model, it's Akamai that's taking the brunt of it, and we don't like those guys. Throw it their way. Yeah, they're built to handle that kind of traffic. And so Akamai doesn't take on all of the traffic. After all, there are Akamai locations in, say, Europe. There's an Akamai location in North America. There's one in Mexico, for example. Those are all hubs of Akamai traffic. Each one of those, to get what the content they need to serve local, has to go to origin. Varnish intercepts those. So Varnish basically just acts as one more caching layer. It does not do the ESI, though. And Varnish also has a little bit more configurability, or at least more accessibly configurable configuration, so that if we need to make some change in how an incoming request is interpreted, we have direct control over the Varnish configs, whereas Akamai, it takes, say, up to an hour to push out a configuration change. So it gives you some agility. Yeah. Any other questions?
Any specific reasons to use Angular? Which looks like you use values and templates. They're more lightweight.
Well, you look at the list of frameworks alphabetically, it's right at the top. Next question? No, we tried a couple. We tried Dust, I think Handlebar for templating. We tried, I can't remember. We tried several, and Angular was the best fit for the particular need. So several were tried. This was the one that just fit best. And this was about 2 years ago when that decision was made. Now, to be fair to the Weather Channel team, they made the choice of Angular. We helped with that. So I don't have the full insight into all of the reasons why they chose Angular over the others. What I saw was that it best fit the needs. Now, we're not using all of the bells and whistles of Angular. For example, it provides the ability to do page routing or Angular routing for dynamic pages and dynamic loading. Unfortunately, Drupal just doesn't play nice with that quite yet, particularly with managing layouts. So we don't use that functionality.
Did you consider any other game plans, like maybe statically caching the blocks, or the different content areas, and then serving it up versus using Mongo? I'm
not sure, using ESI for all the things then. Yeah, remember that requests to Drupal, even if they're relatively quick requests, are still heavy. And we have 3 million locations. So even if you were to use ESI and statically cache, if Drupal's doing that work, you're doing way more work than you need to.
I guess I meant like caching your components in Varnish or something like that as separate paths that you get hit as an API.
Yeah, and that's what the ESI thing does. When something's delivered through ESI, Drupal's still getting hit for that ESI fragment. Yeah, so that's the distinction. So for ESI, Drupal's still getting hit. The only reason to use ESI is if that module is used across a wide swath of pages, or if the TTL for that piece of content varies a great deal from the content below it. So for example, the canonical example is, we've got this list of links on the left-hand side. This actually is an ESI on the current build of the site, and when the page is rendered, this part of the page is empty. It just contains an ESI include statement. That include goes to Drupal and says, give me just this content.
I guess that's what I was saying is instead of going to Drupal, why doesn't it just go to Varnish to get the content?
Well, Varnish has to get it from somewhere. Varnish is just a cache.
Or I guess any sort of static sort of, not Varnish particularly, but some sort of static place where just that piece of content.
Well, so this content will be edited on an ongoing basis. And so if we could just put an HTML file in there, is that what you mean? And then serve that? The thing is, you've already got Drupal. The incremental cost of supporting that menu is relatively low versus the incremental cost of having somebody go in and modify an HTML file on another doc root. So it's just a matter of management. We'll pull it out, yeah. Now, for something like this, however, because there are 3 million locations and there's more than one type of weather page, there's 10-day, hourly, 10-hour, weekly, etc. Because there's so many ways this data is consumed and because it is such a low TTL, it doesn't make sense to have Drupal be bootstrapped to deliver this content. And so that's where it's easy to make that decision to let Angular handle it and just pull the forecast data and assemble it.
Doing it in the ESI also preserves the ability to check for against DDoS. So if we're at the edge checking for invalid locations, we verify that on the edge without having to send those back to Drupal.
That doesn't have anything to do with these. That's the whole page. Yeah.
You have not mentioned the weather data in Drupal, right?
No, weather data is not
The source, the separate source pushes it straight to one.
We have a Linux box in the corner that runs devu random, and that feeds all the weather data. Yeah. I don't remember the weather code. You only have to be right 50% of the time.
So does this site take any submissions, like form submissions or anything?
No, there are no posts. So there is one part of the site where you log in, you provide user profile information, but as a matter of fact, that's actually all handled client side. So we just have a single HTML file that does that. There's no server-side component to it. It's all cookies and local storage based. So, yeah, in fact...
On the Mongo piece, did you guys use the Mongo module, or did you do some form of a custom implementation?
That's a whole separate project, yeah. And me at MediaCurrent, we had nothing to do with the caching layer other than we want it to do X. Yeah. So I can't speak too much to it. I know that Drupal's not in it. It is Scala from top to bottom. So, everybody follow along? Clear as mud? Our next steps are we have a custom integration development environment. We have custom deployment environment. We're going to continue working on that. We are going to be tuning our cache mitigation strategy. That is to say, these pages need to live longer in cache versus these others, and we need to make that a flexible system. One of the strategies, for example, is 90% of the articles, they're just set and forget. They set out there and live in cache effectively forever. But there are other pages and other articles, say seasonal articles or related to a particular storm, that content is constantly being updated on them. So we need a way to make a distinction between the articles that need to have frequent updates and therefore lower TTLs versus those articles that are evergreen and fairly, they just kind of set and forget. So we've got a couple of strategies for making that work. Then we've got the ESI modules. The individual modules have their separate TTLs. Then it's a matter of trying to throw traffic at it, see what particular combination works best. It's probably my wife. And then, of course, we've got the launch upcoming. It'll be done when it's done. So in terms of contrib work, there should be a fair amount of contrib work coming out of this project. That classy panel styles, if you guys attended that session, Derek is fairly animated at times. It's a great project. The weather node framework that we discussed, that's also becoming a contrib module. And the presentation framework, though it has a lot of weather-specific code in it that needs to be generalized. All of these things are going to be becoming contrib out of this project. And Weather Channel has made a big commitment to being a part of the Drupal community. They've been awesome. They've offered a lot of support making sure that we give back. So any more questions?
You just may want to reinforce, Jason, because this always causes confusion. If people go right now to weather.com, it's not on Drupal. So the targeted launch is November 17th. So that's when you'll see all of this live and in action on the public-facing site.
And maybe a resume pop-up.
But yeah, like Jason said, I mean, the Weather Channel has been great about allowing presentations like this in parallel to the work that's going on. So a lot of organizations would make us wait until post-launch to do any kind of case study. So it's pretty cool that they're allowing us.
So we do have a fair amount of time left. I told Chris I'd give him a little bit of time to talk about. They are hiring. They need to bring some Drupal talent in-house. I'll go ahead and throw my nod in that it's a great place to work. They have a lot of really neat things going on there. Always neat projects. They're great people to work with. I don't know if you want to take the stage.
I'm Chris Hill. I'm the Vice President of System Development for Weather Channel, and I manage the development for weather.com. I've got a couple of my coworkers here. One of them judges your performance and not somewhere else. I guess you do better. So we've been working with Jason and his team for a couple of years. They've done a fantastic job, aside from the really bad jokes that he tells. So we're proud to say we just reached our feature complete last Thursday. And we're going for code complete in about 3 weeks, and we launch, as Dave said, on November 17th. There's a rumor that the site is externally accessible, but I'm not going to tell you what the URL is, but Google knows what it is. Everything's all hosted at Acquia, all at AWS, so it should be out there pretty soon. As these guys roll off and go back onto their next big project, we have the need to have some Drupal developers to kind of come and take over the reins from where they left off. So if there's any of this stuff, any of this gobbledygook that he told you about, if any of this is interesting to you, or if you say to yourself, I know all this stuff, so what? I'd love to talk to you about, other opportunities. If you are interested in looking at other places of employment or looking for a place, we'd love to have you and love to talk to you. So that's it. And do you have any questions specifically for me about them or the project? I'll be glad to answer.
Well, and that was great. Thank you.
All right, great.
Awkward. Well, yeah, go ahead.
I have a question about I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
Language translation?
It wasn't on this milestone. We have done work to handle translation. We're using a combination of Drupal's translation features and Angular's translation features. So the translations do happen on the client side. The thing is, there's a lot of discussion that still has to be had. We're still early in the internationalization discussion, so.
You had a question?
That was the exact same question I was going to ask. How are you guys addressing content translation?
Yeah, we have a lot of things in the hopper. I mean, if you have specific questions, I can sit down and talk through it. But yeah, it's not been finalized yet.
I've got more bug than this year.
Bug.
Yeah, with content translation and all that.
Oh.
So I'll come talk to you.
All right. So yeah.
So did you guys change load testing to the infrastructure? Or rather than
So
if it's not live, it's,
yeah. Well,
are you ready for this? 300 million.
I will say that it keeps me up at night. Yeah, because if we had that kind of traffic coming to Drupal, you literally could roast marshmallows from a mile away. So the whole idea is to try to keep traffic from hitting Drupal. That's why we're leveraging Akamai so heavily. That's why we're hitting ESI so heavily. That's why Angular is client side. So as much as possible, we're trying to reduce Drupal getting hit. That said, we have a fair amount of exposure, and we're both. That's what this month is dedicated to: reducing our exposure and increasing, the amount of leveraging of Akamai we can do.
So with all those questions, on the way on Drupal, how many servers do you have to run on the side of the big?
Well, I can tell you how many we have. We have 15, and that is the planned number. So we are going from 144 origin servers across 3 different data centers down to 15, and that is the current plan. So things may change. No, those are separate. Yeah, any more detail than that, I probably couldn't speak to.
So did you do any specific Drupal modifications for the load, or did you just start Drupal and?
We've done some custom modification, but it's nothing. We haven't done major in earnest because, like I said, if we aren't fully leveraging Akamai, the game's over before it starts. So the actual load time that Drupal contributes, the amount of time it takes for a page to load in Drupal, should be the least of our concerns. Like, we should not be thinking about it. We definitely need to target it, definitely need to improve it, definitely need to make it as low as it can be, but that is not the key to the ability to deliver this site. Any other questions? Did I put you all to sleep? Well, if you guys have not seen one of my presentations before, I'm sorry. Because they're full of bad jokes. And I have several more online that you can see for more. The DrupalCon presentation Chill and I did together, he goes into a lot more detail about what Weather Channel was thinking or not thinking when they hired MediaCurrent. And so if you guys are interested in how that process went, you can see that presentation for more detail. There are even more lame jokes in that one as well. So, thank you guys.